So this is just a preset that I start with. I called it Super Supreme because it's a big super saw. What's going on, guys? Matt aka Martin here, back with another video. Today I thought it'd be a cool idea to show you a particular technique that I've been using recently for layering massive chord stacks, for using things like trance and all those things that have the big massive super saws, future bass, melodic kind of dubsteppy stuff, a lot of the stuff genres that I've been experimenting around with recently. So without any further ado, let's jump right into Ableton and show you what I've been up to. Okay, so here we are inside a session in Ableton Live that I've been working on recently and that utilizes this particular technique for chord stacking that I've been using a lot recently. And before we go any further, what I'll do is I'm just gonna play you the chord stacks so that you can get a feel for how they sound, and then I'll go through each layer and how each is working together to create the massive final chord stack sound. Cool, so as you can hear, pretty massive, pretty thick, dense. That's got a lot to do with the chords as well, but totally a lot to do with the layering and the processing that's going on there. So the first layer, which is the main kind of layer in this technique of chord stacking that I've been doing, is the massive kind of main super saw-y type layer. And this sounds like this just on its own. So it sounds kind of pretty cool already. And basically all I've got here is a preset that I made in Sylenth, which is essentially just a massive stack of super saws. I've got 3 oscillators going, 2 in this main one with saw waves with 8 voices each, detuned from each other, and then a 3rd oscillator here, which is pitched an octave up, and I can control the level of that with a macro down here. So this is just a preset that I start with. I called it Super Supreme because it's a big super saw, and I thought it was kind of funny. This preset also has some kind of basic EQ and stuff going on already in it. It's got some EQ, some chorus, some compression, a channel EQ, which I've just got mapped the high of to this kind of byte control over here, which is really nice, and then a saturator at the end of it. I've also got this delay and reverb here, which aren't being utilized in this particular instance of this preset. The next layer that I'm going to go to is this main chord layer. So this is just a kind of a square wave that thickens up kind of the mid-range of the chord, and it sounds like this. Kind of sounds a little bit crap on its own, and I've got some EQ and glue compression here, but basically it's just a square wave with some higher end harmonics introduced with this frequency modulation in operator over here, and then those two sounds laid together sound like this. Without that second layer, with the second layer. You can hear how it kind of thickens it up a little bit. The next layer I'm going to go to is probably my favorite layer and what makes this technique really, really cool, to give these chord stacks that kind of punch to make it really kick through the mix. So what I do for this, I drag in Ableton's stock grand piano preset, and then I turn the brightness all the way up, the hardness all the way up, the reverb all the way down, the release all the way down, the tone all the way down, and then mess around with the glue knob until it sounds kind of nice. As you can see, I've also got a channel EQ here and a compressor going on here as well. And this layer sounds like this. Kind of quite obnoxious and crappy and high-pitched and weird on its own. But when it's layered in with everything, all of that kind of stuff that's bad about it goes away, and you end up with just that really start of the sound, the really kind of key sound. And it adds to the whole chord stack in a way that gives it a lot of punch at the start. And altogether, those three layers sound like this. So you can't really hear the piano in there, but I'll turn it off and you can hear what it does to the sound. Back on. Again, quite subtle, but just adds a lot of that punch to the start of the sound. This is kind of my like secret sauce when it comes to making these massive chord stacks. So that's a good little tip for you. Next thing I do is add a noise layer. And this is literally just white noise that is absolutely, completely, pretty much high passed. And this is just used to give it some brightness and add some high end to the sound. And literally this layer just sounds like this. You can also, if you want to, turn the spread up on operator to give it some width, but that just depends on how wide you want the sound. And how wide the other layers are as well. So this noise layer added in with the other layers sounds like this. Without that noise layer, and with the noise layer. You can hear it's really, really subtle, and I've got it turned down quite a lot, as you can see, comparatively to the rest of the layers. But it just adds a nice kind of high-end sizzle to it. The next thing that I've added, which I sometimes add depending on what I'm going for, but in this particular instance I've added it, is this top line layer, which I realized I just had playing there instead of the main chord layer, which is okay. But this top line layer sounds like this. Now, the sound of this top line layer can vary completely depending on the chord stack and what you kind of want in it. And basically, it's just used to emphasize the top notes of the chords, whatever they tend to be, or could be whatever other notes of the chord that you want emphasized, just like a single note that you want emphasized. Because generally within a chord, you want to kind of try and draw the listener's attention to a single note that has a pattern going on throughout the whole thing, kind of like a melodic contour, I suppose, of the chords. And by adding this kind of separate synth layer that is quite distinct, you draw the listener's attention to that really, really easily. So altogether, these layers sound like this. If I turn off that top line layer, now I'll add it back. You can hear again, it's quite subtle, but it just draws your attention more towards that top note that I've kind of accented with this top line layer. The next few things that really make these chord stacks are the processing on all of them. So what I've got here are a few things. The main things being EQ, reverb, and OTT. So what I'm going to do is just turn on this first EQ to show you what that's doing. Without the EQ. I've just got it kind of brightening up the sound whilst taking out all of that low end crap that's down the bottom. Next is the OTT, and this is kind of the source of the sound and really, really glues it together. I'm just going to play for you what it sounds like without the OTT, and then I'm going to turn the OTT on halfway through playing these chords. So it's adding a lot of brightness to the sound, and it's really kind of just giving the sound a lot of life. Basically, OTT is just a mix of a lot of upwards compression and a lot of downwards compression, and I've just mucked around with the settings, and sometimes I give it some more mid-range, sometimes I give it some more high-end, and play around with the amount and everything as well. But generally what you can do is cut all of that low-end information on these chords, because that will be supplied by the bass. After that, I've just got an EQ going on here, and this can vary. This is just more of like a mixing EQ. Generally, if you've got a melody or something going on over the top of it, you want to carve out some of that mid stuff like I have here, that high mid stuff, and then you might end up wanting to boost some of the low mids, and again, maybe some of that high end as well. And with that EQ on, sounds like this. With it off, you can hear it's just kind of changed the tonality of the sound a little bit, and it works better in the context of the mix. Next thing that I've added here is some reverb. And this just kind of, again, glues the whole sound together, and makes it sit within the mix a lot better. Gives it that kind of massive space that you often want to go for with these kind of chords. And that reverb sounds like this. Pretty cool. Oftentimes I'll also add a delay before this reverb. That just depends on the kind of style of track that I'm going for, but I would add a delay that would also give it this sense of space as well. But again, that depends on the track, and it's all personal preference. The final two layers to this sound are the bass layers, which I have two of. Firstly, I've got a sub layer, which sounds like this. Literally just playing the bass note of the chord. It's a distorted sine wave that just adds the sub. And then I've got a secondary bass layer which gives the bass more of that kind of mid-range, that high end, to make it kind of pop out and stand out. And that layer sounds like this. Generally for this I use some kind of saw wave or some kind of buzzier sound, and then just filter it out a little bit, as you can see that I've done here. These two bass layers together sound like this. Kind of sounds a little bit dodgy, but when you play it with the chords, all of those kind of harmonics and everything just meld together, and you get this really, really nice sounding chord stack that sounds like this. So that is how I have been creating a lot of my massive kind of chord stacks recently. Stuff in a lot of the kind of melodic, trancey, dubsteppy, future bassy kind of stuff that I've been doing, and a sound that I've been really loving lately. I hope you picked up some cool tips and tricks and techniques. The track that I've shown in this is actually the remix that I did for that Flume competition that's happening at the moment. This track might or might not be up by the time this video goes up, but if it is, I'll put a link to it down in the description so you can listen to it there and hear how the chords sound in the context of the mix. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends if you think they'll enjoy it. And again, really hope you got some cool techniques from this video that can help you out with your own productions. Thanks for watching. Hope you're having a good day. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.